Hello and welcome to Blockchain, a Gaming World, episode 189. I'm your host, John Jordan. Don't forget to check out my daily email. You can find that at GamesTX. That's gamestx.substack.com. In today's episode, I'm very pleased to have Yat Siu, the founder and chairman at Animoca Brands. He's back a year on from his conversation that we had last year, which was actually one of the, I think, the most thoughtful podcasts that I've done. And I've certainly thought a lot about what we discussed then, which was about mainly about meme coins, the value of meme coins, what they mean in sort of UGC and what they mean in the sort of way of crypto. And we sort of pick up a little bit where we left off there. So start off talking about meme coins and are they still a thing? Obviously they are. You know, have they developed in the last year? What do they mean for crypto going forward? What do they mean for this idea of sort of digital ownership that Yat likes to talk about in community? But then we talk about a couple of other trends which I think are very important and which Animoca has been closely aligned with. So it invested quite heavily into the TON ecosystem last year, so the Telegram's blockchain. So we talk about whether that's still a big thing or whether that sort of burnt out in 2024. And we also talk about AI agents. I mean, how could we not? But Yat has some interesting thoughts around that, and obviously how AI agents could tie up a lot of different sort of aspects of crypto and blockchain gaming together. So again, a really sort of deep conversation. It's one of those podcasts where you're trying to sort of pass everything Yat's saying at the time and trying to have an interesting response. I think it's one that you have to listen to maybe a couple of times, but really good for Yat. He has a very deep sort of structural thinking around what's going on in the world of blockchain and consumers and gaming. You'd expect that, I suppose, from the chairman of Animoca Brands. Also interesting just to note that we do touch on the fact that Animoca is not sort of working so hard in games internally as it was a couple of years ago. So it's another interesting sort of way of sort of setting the scene for where games fit into the wider blockchain consumer ecosystem. So I hope you enjoy the conversation as much as I enjoyed having it. Don't forget to subscribe. I've got some really good guests coming up in the next couple of weeks, so don't want you to miss out. But on with the show. Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. We are joined, as we often are this time of the year, by Animoca Brands Chairman Yat Siu. How's it going, Yat?
Very good. Thank you for having me again. It seems to be a regular occurrence just to do it around the new year.
Good. No, it's a good. I found it a good starting point to set my aspirations for what you think the year's going to be, and then think on those things. So I'm actually going to. I'm sure you've forgotten because you've done so many interviews since then. But when we spoke this time ish last year. We sort of got into a bit of a sort of thing about meme coins, and it was philosophical and interesting, and I thought about that a lot actually since so I thought I'd sort of go back to meme coins because they were obviously they've been a thing for as long as crypto, pretty much, and I guess me as being slightly sort of I don't know, traditional, despite being in blockchain all this time, was sort of like not anti-meme coin, but sort of like, what's the point of these meme coin things? They're just sort of silly, whatever. And you were pointing out, well, this is we should be thinking about maybe these silly things because they have value and people have produced them and people can use them and all this sort of stuff. So we've got a bunch of other stuff that I want to go into, but meme coins I think are a good sort of starting point. And I guess meme coins, I wouldn't say they're one of the big trends of last year. Really,
well, they certainly were. They kind of were in the second quarter. They were really big then. Exactly.
Yeah. So do meme, and I guess generally, I guess when we're talking about stuff, there's also that sort of what Animoca is doing as a sort of entity and a venture sort of company as well. And I don't think you've done much in terms of meme coins yourself. So I just kind of wonder how there's your personal view on, you think deeply about people owning digital assets and what that means for the sort of the world, and how meme coins fit that in Animoca. So where are we with meme coins?
So first of all, optimistic about meme coins generally. There are a few things obviously that we need to look at. But just to sort of maybe correct that statement, we're actually fairly involved in certain aspects of meme coins. Like for instance, we invested in companies that are basically building games on meme coins, like with the Shiba Inu ecosystem. I look at meme coins really as a distribution network as well. It's kind of like the new kind of app store. When you think about sort of what is a token, it's a representation of a network effect. They represent community network effects, and if you are able to attract the attention of large meme communities, then you have a product. That's an example. The other one, of course, which was a very big launch at the end of last year, was PENGU, and we're investors in basically Igloo and involved in the launch of PENGU, which was actually a pretty I would say it's perhaps the meme coin that has the sort of, I guess, best utility amongst meme coins, as it were. And by the way, that to me is really interesting because it may start off as a meme coin or mimetic in nature, but then later on, part of its narrative becomes its utility, right? And when you look at NFT collections launching tokens, actually they are meme coins. Or now, of course, what's happening, meme coins themselves, in order to deepen the network effects of their communities, they're actually launching NFTs of their own. So you see this classic cycle that's happening because they're all cultural in nature. So I see that happening there. And so why I'm bullish about broadly meme coins as well is because meme coins to me are kind of narrative indicators of what is actually popular. Meme coins is an open market polymarket without being polymarket. Right? Polymarket, you're placing a specific bet on something. But actually, meme coins are launched, and its price action and popularity gives you an idea of what the zeitgeist might be in a certain environment. Like, for instance, and it's a real example, my daughter was like, talking to me about Chill Guy. And, I'm not really on TikTok, so I had no idea what Chill Guy is normally. But I said, yeah, I heard about Chill Guy. But why did I hear about Chill Guy? Because of the meme coin, not because that I hang out in TikTok, right? And it's kind of not that different from back in our day. How do we get our news? We read a magazine and we look in a newspaper. We say, oh, look at this. So I hear about a sort of cultural phenomena in the newspaper, and suddenly, but maybe the kids would have seen it on MTV. How do you know that? So again, it's kind of these things that draw together and it brings communities together. Now, AI agents actually are mimetic in nature as well. And just to be clear, like I think this thing about Homo neurans, right, which is we are narrative storytelling creatures. We're the kind of people that sort of, as a community, we live on stories. Like you could argue that money is a story, democracy is a story, right? Politics is a story of some sort. And we then find a common consensus. And what is a meme? A meme is actually one that we agree with each other. The mimetic nature is that you agree and I agree that this is cool. And if a million people agree, then it actually becomes a more popular meme as opposed to maybe just people, like 10 or 20 people, for example, right? And so these are these constructs. And so to me, they're indicators of what the world is looking for. Clearly, there is a gambling aspect, a speculative asset that ties into this as well. We shouldn't forget that, right? But the energy that goes into that can only really happen when the community agrees that this is a meme worth pushing, which is why you have things like political memes or silly cat memes as well that go into it, or orchestrated memes, which to me, for instance, PENGU is an example of a very well orchestrated meme that is entering meme territory, but wouldn't be normally classified as a meme in terms of way that it was launched. No. And I want to close with that statement. Like Murad and all these guys are saying, oh, fair launch and whatever. Let's be very clear about one thing. Even these so-called fair launches on Solana are not fair launches because snipers are out there basically just sort of being on that end of side, basically sort of sniping the market. And so therefore you have to be mindful how you launch. It's not as easy as just launch a token, right? Yeah. And also, what the community may or may not expect. I mean, you can say it's just a meme, so don't expect anything. But of course, if it doesn't go in the hands of the community, but it goes in the hands of snipers, basically just taking everything, then you destroy the construct and actually you harm the reputation of whatever meme that you're trying to put out. And that's really a fancy way of saying that, VCs have very much value in the space because VCs, I guess to some extent like ourselves, we are willing to lock ourselves up. We're willing to say, look, 3 years down the road, 2 years down the road, once the ecosystem is built up, we will then have some releases and we'll do something and you'll know what we're doing, as opposed to the so-called fair launch that actually just goes into the hands of people that actually just really want you to dump on you, right? Mm-hmm. So there's this thing, and so that's the part that makes me a bit more negative on memes, not because memes are not powerful and important, but because it's being abused on one cycle. Like memes are great, but you have the abuse that happens. And this is not VCs abusing it because they're not doing sniping, right? Mm-hmm. It's the snipers that are doing it, but they're trying to stoke this narrative around, oh, VCs are bad. But actually, and by the way, VCs can be bad too. I'm not saying that it's not that it's not true necessarily. All I'm saying is that it's not as black and white as they make it out to be, and it will draw away that attention on meme coins because people aren't really sort of succeeding in this way or building communities this way because essentially you have this sniping action. So just be mindful of that. That said, I think I'm bullish about meme coins, especially creating more utility as platforms as distribution and as icons of Web3 culture.
Yeah. No, there's some good framing there. I guess PENGU as a meme coin, I guess, was interesting. I don't think they would consider themselves a meme coin. I've not seen that they've. I mean, obviously.
Oh no, they do. I mean, they're basically really? Out. Yeah, they're like saying, we're going to be Doge, and we're bigger than Bonk. I mean, that's already kind of saying that we're basically going to be out there, being the biggest meme coin. And I think there was one point where PENGU was the biggest meme coin on Solana and fighting for that position.
But I guess what's interesting there is you say, Project PENGU came from sort of a failed or a failing NFT sort of collection, and that then sort of became a real life sort of sort of collection.
I mean,
and
much credit to Luca and his
Oh,
team.
yes.
Basically,
Yeah.
absolutely
Yeah.
incredible. And it's also the reason we backed them because there was an energy and a drive there that was necessary, and it actually gives a lot of hope for other NFT projects. Clearly, after PENGU, all the other NFT collections started to go like, "Ooh, what's happening here?"
Yeah.
Whether they will succeed as well or not is a different question. But it certainly brought energy into the space, particularly with NFTs.
Yeah. And I guess it does make more sense. One of the weird things I thought, well, obviously there's the Pudgy Penguins and there's Igloo, their sort of holding company. But as well as that being, if you're saying that's a meme coin, which I didn't pick up, they're obviously launching their own blockchain called Abstract. So there's a sort of a
Correct.
secondary thing. So I guess there are some meme coins are sort of, there's a purity around them. So Doge is obviously famously some bloke who hated crypto created a meme coin that became the biggest meme coin because he basically dumped his keys. So all it could be was like be taken up by the community. I guess something like Pengu, it's slightly more nuanced because there's all these different sort of things, sort of elements sort of going on. And they've got obviously various games based on Pudgy Penguins also coming out. So I guess they're not a pure meme coin because a pure meme coin exists for its own sake rather than having any.
But I mean, I guess I would challenge that thought a little bit because
Come on.
it may start off as that. I mean, in some
Okay.
ways, but then actually the community picks it up, and when it's owned by the community, which is what happens with meme coins, they shape it in their own form and create a culture around it. Whether the culture is them or the culture takes them, like it depends on I guess the strength of each community. But that's actually what happens, right? And so when people are launching games on, like say, Doge or SHIB, for instance, or Pengu, are we actually talking about the fact that the game is creating utility and therefore that makes the meme community? No, it's just an added utility. I mean, we could probably argue that the birth of Bitcoin had a meme nature toward it in terms of essentially as a revolt to the financial system, right? It's a meaning behind it, right? And now people do all sorts of things with Bitcoin or Ethereum, for instance, as well. Today you're not looking at just its sort of messaging at start. Now you're joining Ethereum because this guy's building a DeFi protocol, or this guy's doing something cool, or someone else told you about it unrelated to the team or unrelated to its original nature. It's completely changed from what it was since birth. And so I think that's the evolution. And by the way, I think that's why certain meme coins will succeed in the long term. And the reason why is that when you have certain type of utility embedded, the utility becomes the narrative of the meme itself. Right? In other words, hey, like we're talking about AI meme coins. What is that? What it really is, it's a meme coin that has an AI narrative. That's all it really means, right? And so if you want to evolve yourself as a starting meme coin, then you have to be relevant, like fashion. So that means whether this is an AI, or whether this is games, or whether this is whatever cycle, you have to the community picks it up. And it's up to the community to say, we're going to go there, right? Just being a meme for meme's sake can work for some, but won't work for most. And I think also if you think about, I think I may have said this on your show, we think the institutional era of crypto has come. So if you're an institution buying into essentially tokens, you want to look at something that you can, put a plan around. And that's going to be hard if it's just a meme coin. But I fully expect in the future, there will be things like meme coin ETFs. Or there will be, for instance, listed companies that might be buying meme coins, right? That's going to happen. And it's going to be easier to do that when you have a narrative to go with it, right? So memes to me are just narratives that we follow and agree with. And so the utility adds to the narrative. It may not necessarily be the narrative itself.
Okay. I guess I always go back to you can't be a meme coin if you've got a roadmap. So I guess that's sort of it. Maybe a sort of split difference there. So
yeah, so it's not a roadmap, but it's people doing stuff, and then a network effect emerges from it, and you go, "Oh, what's this?" Right.
I have to say, so a small outcome of my thinking from our last discussion about memes actually was when it came to the 1st of November. I was like, but I should have a little wager on what's going on in America. And I kind of thought, what should I do? And obviously, Polymarket was baked in, and I thought, I don't really want to buy Tesla because Tesla's through the roof. So I did actually buy a very modest amount of Doge. So I kind of thought that's going to be the leverage. If Trump wins, that's going to be the leverage of sort of Elon's sort of power in the industry. So that worked quite well. So, and I would sort of see, I'll come back to your ETF. I would sort of see almost a sort of a Doge ETF to me makes much more sense than a Ripple ETF or I think a Litecoin one's just been announced. I mean, that seems, Doge is, I think, the purest, I mean, obviously it's the biggest meme coin, so it has that sort of purity to it. Anyway, I don't want to get too bogged down in meme coins because we've got other stuff I want to get your opinion on. So another big thing that you guys, as a company and you personally, were quite quick onto. Again, I was not so quick, slow on this one. Was Telegram as a distribution method? You've spoken about meme coins as a distribution method, but Telegram and the Ton blockchain. So you sort of in the sort of Q1, Q2 last year, you were actively doing stuff with Ton, and I think you sort of explained why you think that's the case. I wonder again with the trend, how do you see that one playing out? To me, I found that one sort of came in really hard for a few months, and then I struggled to see strong sort of outcomes from it. That may be because I'm too impatient. They may be coming, but how do you see that as someone?
Well, you're becoming more crypto.
maybe,
it's like,
maybe.
Yeah, it's like what's happening? It's happening this week? No, not enough.
Yes.
Anyway, so I mean, I guess the first thing I would say is, when we got into Telegram, really, which was like in 23, right?
Yeah. Okay.
It was the vision around basically sort of how do we tap into that audience. And actually, I would say that vision has proven out and continues to help companies today in terms of getting distribution and reach, right?
Yep.
Whether this is like the Catizens or whether this is the Gamies and so on, right? It did literally bring tens of millions of users into the ecosystem. Now, of course, you have the Sybil attacks as well. And so what you see, and this is where some of the weaknesses of Ton came about, but that's actually where blockchain comes as a solution, because now with blockchain, you can now, looking at the wallet and so on, you can start to determine, okay, so were you a net extractor? Are you a real user? What have you done with it? And eventually I see the evolution of airdrops, which is basically a form of marketing really, as just evolving, right? So this is, and at the end of the day, Telegram is still the most powerful distribution platform. The issue, of course, is it's harder to determine the quality of the user. But again, because they're building on chain, you can get better and better and better at it, right? So for instance, Gamey, which was really a hyper-casual gaming platform on Telegram that reached a lot of users, now has a very sizable advertising business because they're actually now able to reach to the actual users that they know are actual real quality users because they're using the game. And in some ways, the game becomes a proof of humanity and proof of action for you to then determine whether I should pay advertising. And so it becomes more efficient to advertise on Gamey for a Telegram user than necessarily just doing a mass airdrop on Ton by itself. And actually, that's what happens, right? Like if you've got a blockchain, people build and compose new products and services on top, and it'll evolve from there. So I'm very bullish on that. And we shouldn't forget that, one thing that dampened really, and again, this is narrative, right? Dampened really Ton was what happened to Pavel, right? When he got arrested. Well, that's what, the drop actually happened because of that. And then there was a cycling around, and he's still, as far as I know, is still in France, unable to leave, right? And so I actually think there is a little bit of concern, and there's a little bit of a heavy air that's sitting around. Yes, the resilience to me has proven that Ton didn't go down to 1, right? So that's really good, right? So that's resilience. But I think if he does get out and it's settled or whatever it is, I actually think it's going to have a huge impact. It's kind of like why wouldn't it? I mean, if Trump and Elon have an impact on Doge, then why wouldn't Pavel have an impact on Ton, right?
Oh, yeah. No.
Sounds like it should make sense, right? And it really what it is investor sentiment and confidence, right? And so the confidence part is something that people sit back and who are the ones that need this confidence? Well, retail a little bit, but actually it's also institutions. Right? If you're an institutional investor and you're buying a token, you have to justify it, and then you say, hey, oh, you're buying Ton? Hey, wait, hold on. Isn't the founder of Ton stuck in France? What's going on here, right? Like these are things that, if you're a fund manager, you have to answer for it. And if it happens not to work out, what's the downside? The downside is pretty big, right? If, from a job security standpoint. So these are factors that come into play. So I do think that his release will have an impact narratively, but the utility of Ton is undisputed at this point, and I think will continue to do so. And what I love about it is that it doesn't insist that you use Ton exclusively.
No.
Like you can build on Ton, and you can leverage your audience, but you can build your own blockchain, or you can build a separate game. And the smart guys are actually really sort of leveraging those viral network effects, those viral effects, and growing the network strength, and then building really cool stuff. So I think that it's a really positive net contributor to Web3.
Yeah, I think Ton as a token, I think has performed sort of as first of all much better than people would have expected, considering its co-founder has been locked up in France for 6 months, whatever. I guess what's interesting is that now we are seeing some people launch sort of fairly sophisticated sort of games rather than just the tap to earn stuff. I think that will got
It's an
rightly
evolution.
blown away. Yeah.
Yes,
But they're
correct.
connecting to other blockchains. So now you see, I think Ronin people are connecting to Ronin, people are connecting to Immutable, that sort of stuff. So that's interesting. But I guess some of those, I guess particularly Hamster Combat was the one that was announcing massive numbers, and I think that sort of froth has blown off. So I guess we see whether Telegram as that sort of app, sort of network, how again it comes back to distribution, which is the biggest issue in sort of Web3 still. So that's useful. I guess what it plugs into, we wait and see.
So the way to also think about it is that I think Telegram, although it's much bigger than that, but Telegram is a good illustration of the future of app chains.
Yeah. Okay.
Because, for instance, when you think about an app chain, of course, Telegram being, of course, much more than that, Ton being much more than that, but really the reason you use Ton is to leverage Telegram. So it's got an app chain-like narrative. You wouldn't use Ton if it wasn't for Telegram. And so what really Ton does is it opens up its community construct, but also I feel what it does also is essentially ensure that Telegram will survive forever because people will build new constructs and layers on top of it and have a vested interest in its success. I mean, that's a perfect way in which your community gets to own the network, much better than holding shares in Telegram, but actually by owning essentially Ton tokens, right? And I see this happening with games as well, right? So there's all this debate before about, do we use this chain, that chain for the game, whatever. And they will use that as maybe a settlement layer.
Okay.
But actually, I think the app chain element of, particularly medium to successful games, launching their own chains to leverage network effects that then basically end up relying on the security of, basically sort of L1s. That to me actually is the next evolution, because it allows people to compose and add towards these ecosystems, games included. So very, very excited about where that's going, and I think we'll see a lot more chains launching. By the way, these chains launching don't necessarily need to have their own token. I mean, Base doesn't have a token, right? No. But it allows people to compose and build on top of it, and that to me is kind of heralding the future of the API economy, as it were. Like the API economy was the way that we used to think about that, but actually doing essentially a chain is essentially a quasi API opening. And it allows this kind of composability where then your community can be with the meta wherever it needs to be, right? So, because that's the thing, right? I think what we can see with blockchain is that, are you doing a meme? Or are you doing an AI agent? Or are you doing a DEX? Or what is it? Like, how can one company possibly navigate all of this? And I think that's the struggle that centralized game launches have had, because they're like, well, do we now do more of this? Or do we do more now of that? Or how do we design our token? Because you can't possibly react to the speed of the market by yourself. But if you open the tools to the community, which is what essentially an app chain does, then actually you create that. Of course, you give up much more control of where the game is going. And I think this is what's so powerful about what happened with Ronin, because now you tap into the Axie community, and then another community like Pixels joins it, and then now everyone is sort of partaking in this, not only because of one or two games, but just because you want to tap into the audience. And as you know, of course, if you look at the classic Bartels model, most people play games at the end of the day for social reasons, and that's where they stick, right? So they might even, in the classic Web2 gaming world, you might say, they came because of the fun, because they wanted to level up or wanted to have this, and then they stayed for social. Well, in Web3, they came for the money, but then they stayed for the social as well, right? So we see that impact happening as well, and it shows that longevity that you see. How everyone used to write off Axie Infinity, and look, it's here. Right?
Yeah, just to finish off the Telegram thing, one sort of final point I think was interesting was that the success of sort of Telegram as an airdrop platform for sort of Ton tokens meant that people were buying the stars, which was their platform token, which they just brought in at the same time. And that was the reason that Telegram became profitable as nothing to do with blockchain, but it became profitable as a company for the first time after about 10 years because it added this sort of crypto thing. So I guess that's sort of an interesting way in which these economies, Web2 and Web3, can sort of flywheel each other. And anyway.
Absolutely. And by the way, I think this is just illustrates just the power of what happens when you open up the network and the benefits that come from it. And I think people still have difficulties in Web2 imagining how that works because they're thinking in classic, here's a product to sell you, as opposed to what happens when you give ownership of the network and you have a way, you open up these new business paradigms that really weren't possible in Web 2.
We've mentioned it a few times. I do want to see how much time we could get into AI agents. Obviously,
sure.
Very. You could say at the moment, I've been complaining that Telegram's a bit frothy. I mean, nothing more frothy than AI agents at the moment. In terms of are they? I mean, I'm not technical enough to know whether they just all are sort of ChatGPT wrappers. Probably the case in many cases. But we're seeing basically from nothing over the last 6 weeks, we've seen what it is now sort of $20 billion market cap of tokens of various. Some of them are platforms. Mainly, they're just these sort of AI agents sort of spouting stuff out on Twitter. Some of it's good. Some of it is it's just like nonsense.
Yes.
But I guess as I was sort of thinking about it, and we'll see how it impacts gaming as well, I guess, in the coming months. There is sort of an interesting thing there where we have meme coins that we sort of have some idea of sort of what they are. They may have utility, but not to begin with. And then we have sort of these distribution networks, maybe a bit like sort of Telegram, which obviously has a lot of bots anyway. I mean, it's sort of a bot network. Mm-hmm. And then we have these AI agents that sort of may do useful things, may just do funny things, may, whatever. And it does seem to me that those sort of three things actually do sort of funnel into each other. And at the moment, I say we're in very early stages of AI agents where I don't think anyone expects really them to do anything useful. That's not really the point. But you can sort of see quite quickly that, it will start off with the fun because quite quickly it will become, there will be some serious stuff in there.
And I mean, speaking about gaming, I mean, it started with the fun, and the fun gave us NVIDIA, and now look at that, right? Yeah. So I think we simply cannot discount why people do whimsical, crazy, silly things, because they lead to some of the greatest breakthrough innovations in history. But now, talking specifically about AI agents, I think the narrative is one thing, but I think the reason why it's so powerful is because right now I agree with you. A lot of the AI agents are more like Wizard of Oz, right? Basically, right? Yeah. Where it's like a little bit mechanized and some stuff, but actually, is it really an AI or is it like a human in the back and doing silly things and all that kind of stuff and some editing? However, it's getting better and better. And really, when you want to project into the future, maybe even not so this sort of future, because you see it already happening, actually people are working for AIs, right? Because here's the thing about Web3 and AI that is so unique that basically you can't do in Web 2, which is AIs can basically interact and generate tokens.
Yes.
Which means that an AI can actually pay a human to do stuff, which is already kind of happening in the form of airdrops and activations. And so when you get more of that autonomous nature, and just like the story of Doge, you're going to have an AI agent that will have its keys done, and it will do some stuff, and people will interact with it for receiving tokens, and there's a mimetic around it, which means they'll start working for an AI fully, and there won't even be a Wizard of Oz in the back, basically sort of puppeteering, right? So that's going to happen. It's a kind of sort of there in certain examples already, and I think that captures people's imaginations. It's kind of like the metaverse in 21. It doesn't mean the metaverse is dead. It just means that it captured people's imagination in a way, and it's kind of carrying it forward, but doesn't mean there's real utility around it. The other thing that I'm super excited about is how AI is sort of affecting mashup culture in a much more financial way. And so I take this example of back in the days of YouTube, right? If you might remember, when YouTube launched and people were creating AMVs and mashup videos of anime videos and games and whatever, they were all saying, hey, you know what? Like, we don't like that, right? We're going to stop it and shut you down and DMCA takedowns. But then actually it turns out that actually it was building communities with a mashup of so-called official Hollywood titles. And now there can be no such thing as a Hollywood movie without YouTube and TikTok mashups that are out there, but that are human-generated with AI support. And that's actually what's happening right now. So the amount of times that we're getting vampire attacked as a brand, in terms of, AImonica, or like recently we've had this thing where someone was basically creating an AI around me, right? Okay. I was like, okay, that's funny, and sort of spouting nonsense clearly, right? But the point is just that what they're really doing is they're drawing attention, and then what they're doing is they're basically astroturfing into our world and our communities. They're kind of the new mashup. And so now we have to think as a business, and I think this is true for games and any kind of brand, well, to what level do we sort of interact? It's kind of like the Chill Guy story. Chill Guy can either say, screw that, I don't want anything to do with it, and fight it, which is not exactly winning, or he can try to embrace it. And that's kind of what we saw with Hollywood and YouTube, right? And sort of UGC. They fought UGC, and then they just gave up and they said, you know what, it's much better to do it that way. So I see that angle sort of developing as well. I am also positive about AI agents as a way of onboarding people, because I see a future where we're not going to be dealing with a wallet in the same way. We're just going to talk to the agent, and it's so much easier to do that. And they can secure the keys and so on. So I think there's going to be evolutions happening in this area. But I think the big trigger point for AI in gaming, I actually think it's going to be GTA 6.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yes, but I don't think it's because people are going to say, "Oh my goodness, this is, like GTA is going crypto." No, no, no. I don't mean that. I mean it because people are going to sort of see the power of what an NPC can do and work and evolve. It's going to mushroom all these companies. Basically, companies like Virtuals are going to start issuing gaming agents, like that type of stuff, right? And I actually think it's going to create a new sort of narrative interest in gaming AI and gaming in general as well, because sort of love it or hate it, we are so driven by external narratives, because I think the Web3 community is so forward looking, right? They're the earliest of early adopters in a speculative manner, right?
Yeah.
So there was Meta and Metaverse was going. There's AI and AI is going, right? And so when there's a big cultural event that captures everyone's zeitgeist, then you will see essentially tokens emerge from that. Trump is being elected, Trump, basically tokens of all sorts, right? So I think we'll see that, and that'll drive interest as well, and it'll tilt the entire sort of ecosystem back into, hey, gaming is kind of cool again, right? And gaming is silently growing, right? I mean, we can see the stats, but in terms of getting sort of the mind share that it had before in terms of the Web3 community, I think will come around the time GTA is getting its hype cycle, I think.
Okay, that'll be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah. Just on that sort of point, you mentioned. I mean, I can't know how you pronounce it, but it's Animoca, but with an AI at the front, and it's basically like
it's called. I think it's AImonica. So it's kind of like,
yeah.
and they've got like this typical anime girl that's like super busty, and we're like, okay.
But I wonder, how do you? I mean, how do you? As a I'm sure you definitely deal with loads of that stuff, sort of anyway, sort of legally. But that sort of thing, did you say, it's an interesting crossing of the line, because obviously it's not you, and people might think it is you. But you've sort of embraced it. I think you were given some tokens and you're airdropping them to people. So you've
right. Yeah. So
it.
But it's not that different from when Vitalik gets every meme coin that's out there, just because they, and then they drop tokens. And what does he do? He gives it away. I mean, that's the only thing I can do.
Oh yeah,
right?
no, yeah.
But yes. But also, I think to me, it's I don't know if it's a Chinese proverb or it's probably a popular proverb. I mean, imitation is a form of flattery.
Yeah.
Maybe it's the deepest form of flattery, right?
Yeah.
And I think the reason also is because I never really sell tokens, so it's easy to airdrop stuff to me because I ended up doing stuff with it, right?
Yeah,
and by the way, that same is true for people like Vitalik and so on. They don't cash out, right? They give it out, but I think the embracing of it is part of the culture, right? And I think this is an important factor. Like, I feel like if I reject it, first of all, I don't think that's my nature. But if I rejected it, I actually would go sort of speak against the nature of Web3. Speaking of against the nature of Web3, I mean, look at what happened to Suneo, right? I mean that was kind of wild in terms of both the sort of censorship on tokens, which is understandable in their approaches, and then essentially the workaround because of the fact that sort of the censorship resistance around L2s, where people created backdoors and basically still had the tokens out there. It just shows that there is a culture in Web3 that even the largest of Web2 companies, with all their resources, struggle to understand. In the same way that UGC culture was really hard to understand in the beginning, right? And so I think I actually personally think you have to embrace it. And in a way, I would argue that if AImonica does badly, does it indirectly reflect badly on us, even if we're not involved? Do you see what I'm saying? Right?
Yeah.
It's kind of a funny thing, right? And so and in YouTube, if it doesn't do well, you take it down, right? But on blockchain, you can't take it down; it's there forever, right? So it's kind of an interesting, weird scenario where you're almost forced to participate, I think, in a way, or you have to launch something of your own to counter it, right? So there it's I think it's fascinating. I mean, I love it because it's super creative, and as long as you can build with, because there's also the other thing. If you know that the team is building with good intentions, you can support it, right? As opposed to there's people just doing also. I mean, we have a lot of fake Animoca tokens. Nobody cares, right? Because everyone knows it's a scam, right?
I know time's coming to an end, but sort of final question. So, how does this all come together in terms of, obviously Mocaverse is your big thing. We were talking about that last year. The token hadn't gone live last year. It has gone live, been very successful, I think. I'm sure you've been pretty happy with that. And that's that's a solid project. You're trying to build network effects and ID, and it's definitely got a roadmap on there. No, not a meme coin.
No, not a meme coin.
But how do some of these sort of trends, do you think? Can you Can you
So,
evolve
so
it in
yes,
that way?
so a couple of things, right? So at Animoca, I guess there's a couple strategies. One of the strategies, of course, sort of seeing where the market is going and supporting that. But then there's the other one where we look at gaps, where we say,
Yeah.
what are the things that we can do that the ecosystem needs that is kind of not fulfilled? And so for Mocaverse, we're really trying to solve digital identity as essentially the form of having reputation. And this, by the way, came from our experience around Ton, right?
Okay.
Where we had all these, you airdrop a bunch and then suddenly you realize,
Yep.
oh my goodness, 80 to 90% is actually Sybil attacks. And how do I know that I create this right type of behavior that you basically want to drop to the people that have a good reputation, as we do in real life, because that's the thing, right? Like in real life, we have ways to attest to our reputation. I went to this university, I worked here, these are my friends, right? But in Web3, you're constantly anonymous, which means, in a way, if you commit a crime somewhere else, you can start afresh with zero consequences. And we don't think that makes sense in the long term. It's hard to sort of, how do you create a network that you can trust? Because, and this is the other thing that's also very clear, the countries and GDPs that have the highest amount of sort of GDP overall also have very high interpersonal trust. Because if I know that I can buy something from you and you're not going to screw me right away, then that builds the way in which you can create less friction on your trade. And that's kind of what we need as well in Web3. Like, I need to know that I'm airdropping to the right people. And by the way, when we talk about reputation systems, it doesn't just have to be proof of humanity, which is kind of what we're doing with, of course, basically Humanity Protocol. Because we also think that AI can have a good reputation too, right? To the point that AI is someone that can sort of, I totally foresee a future where people will airdrop tokens to this AI because it might do stuff with it. Maybe it invests it well, or maybe it promotes it well, it does something, and they'll just airdrop them a whole bunch of stuff in the same way that Vitalik gets airdrop tokens, or sometimes I get airdrop tokens because they assume that, I will do something with it because of the way that I used to behave before, right? The prior behavior informs of their reputation. So that's what Mocaverse is trying to do, and our 540 plus portfolio companies are all testing elements of that reputation that then will grow that network effect. And of course, this is how we onboard people into Web3, because with SK, we had basically millions of users essentially onboard into Mocaverse with the MOCA ID, and of course that's the journey of Web3, and they can basically start sort of potentially receiving some tokens, which is a way for them to get a taste of Web3 and hopefully get deeper into this. And of course, Korea is a very key market for us, so we started launching that with SK there first. So that's kind of the direction of things, where we see a gap, but then we want to invest and support that. And that's also what we do with education, with like Open Campus and AI education as well, and trying to solve things like student loans. Because, for instance, if a student actually gets their loans through crypto and pays it back, guess what? That student is essentially crypto for life, right? Not only because it helps solve a great problem for him or her, but also because they learn about the nature of crypto. And that's how things like PayPal and Venmo onboarded their financial rails for students back in the day. I think we can do the same basically in Web3, right? So these are gaps that we see. Like, if someone else was doing it, then we just back them. But if we think, hey, this is a big one, and nobody's doing it, then we build it, right? That's kind of the way we do it, right? And that's also the reason why, we've done over 160 game investments, but the cadence of our game investments has decreased because of us building, especially because so many good games are coming out. It's much easier to back them and support them than actually building a new game from scratch, which is what we had to do in 2018 and 2019 because nobody was making games, right? So we have to kind of evolve with that, and at Animoca, that's how we think we can help really contribute the most in our ecosystem as we redeploy capital into the space.
Good. Covered an enormous amount of stuff there, but a pleasure as ever. I'll have to go away and think about this for the next 6 months. As I did.
Well, I mean, yeah. So maybe as one thought thing for you to think about as well. Like, we think NFTs are going to have a pretty big comeback.
Okay.
And so that might be controversial, and maybe as a closing statement for you to ponder about whether you agree or not, is that Web3 is a new wealth class, right? It's not existing people who had money that got it. It's a new wealth class, and so NFTs as representations of these social Veblen status goods are basically the way in which you say, hey, this is the distinction. In the same way that a Birkin bag or where you live or the house that you're in is a distinction of that. But they're not liquid in the same way. And I see a lot of people make that same mistake, which is to say, oh, it doesn't trade as much as a meme coin, even though NFTs are memes really in itself as well, right? But it doesn't trade as much, therefore it's not as valuable. But that's not really true, because the representation is much more personal. So it is much more symbolic, and it's much more reputational and much more status oriented. which I believe is much more valuable to the human at the end. So basically, what's the distinction between someone who has 5 million Dogecoin and 10 million Dogecoin? He has more money.
Yeah.
But actually, he's still a Dogecoin holder.
Yeah.
I don't care if you have 5 million more. But if I have a golden Bored Ape, or if I have a Rolex, or if I have suddenly there's a distinction. And actually, that's what people sort of seek for from a status standpoint. It gives them more purpose and elevates sort of their reputation.
Okay.
And I think this is where NFTs are going to have a massive comeback in terms of these status items. That's not true for all NFTs.
No.
But, whether it's punks, the reason why Bored Apes is still 16, 17 ETH is because they've elevated from that. And yes, we can agree that a lot of people are not going to make money on meme coins, but the percentage that are going to make a lot of money. And what are they buying? And we think it's going to be NFTs in terms of those status items across the ecosystem. So we're bullish about NFTs in 25, and let's see where that goes.
Good. Well, in 12 months' time, we can
we can come back and take a chance.
Come back and see.
Yes, exactly. Yes. Yeah.
Excellent. Yeah, that was a brilliant. Thank you so much for your time.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
And thanks to you guys for watching, listening, however you are consuming the podcast. Remember, every episode we are talking to the people who are looking at what's going on in the world of blockchain gaming in particular, and trying to make sense of it. So I hope you are subscribed. I hope you're making sense of it, and we'll see you next time.